Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to show you guys one of the most amazing hands I've ever seen. The kind of hand that take a picture of this, frame this on your wall, watch the hand again and again. This hand exemplifies what makes an elite poker player one of the most amazing hands I've ever seen played in poker in terms of the educational value. It really shows you what good poker players are made of, and if you're not there yet, this hand contains a lot of what you need to make that next step. Okay, so this is a final table. We have 7 players left. You guys can see there are quite nice prize jumps, and we have a chip leader, Juan Dominguez, in second in chips, who I never know how to pronounce this guy's name, but both of these guys top players. The effective stacks they're roughly 40 big blinds deep. The hand's going to play BBB, Queen Jack suited versus Ace 8 offsuit. Juan is going to pot open. He's opening very wide here, putting pressure because as the, second in chips, D doesn't really want to get all in, so he's not going to put as much counter pressure on Juan as he would in a normal cash game situation. So here on the flop, Ace, King two-tone. How much money does each player's hand want? So Juan Dominguez, he has, we call this the nut high card. So usually we're used to showing down ace high, but with an ace, king in wide ranges, we can show down queen high. So this is a kind of hand that in an ideal situation would put something like one small bet and then check down and often win a showdown. Of course, unless it improves. D, on the other hand, has a hand that's extremely strong, and given the wideness of ranges and the shallowness of stacks, this might actually be a hand that wants to get all the chips in. And if it does, the question's always how. And because this is an MTT, if Juan Dominguez is putting all the chips in, D's kind of less happy about it. Whereas if he's putting the chips in and he has reason to think he's ahead, that this hand is definitely very strong and in a cash game would get all the chips in. So yeah, let's see how the hand starts. Juan makes the small bet, which is really just perfect for his exact hand. This is exactly where he wants to go. And here, we know D wants a bigger pot, so he could go for it straight away, or he could just call, and both of those options are on the table. Each has its advantages and disadvantages. The more aggressive your opponent is firing with air and putting pressure, maybe you want to call. Some guys play back against this or disbelieve this, or they're calling stations, or they're just passive, and then you have to build a pot size on your own. So D makes a small raise. It's important to recognize at this point, Juan Dominguez's hand is always going to call because he gets pot odds. The pot's a bit too big for him in the sense that he should no longer be very happy to show down queen high, and he can consider turning his hand into a bluff at some point. So far, so good, normal hand. Now that we're on the turn, Jack of Hearts kind of shuffles things up, and this is where the beauty of the hand is, because as this hand progresses, these players are going to have to constantly reevaluate how much is their hand worth and how much money does their hand want and what do they want to do with it. And it's going to be in very non-standard ways, because look at Queen Jack, you just made a pair of jacks. Is it good enough to show down? Well, yeah, you can now check down your pair of jacks and maybe you win against your opponent's worst jack or you raise something worse. And D, with a flush coming in and a straight coming in, he doesn't want to go for stacks anymore for sure. But he still wants a bit more money. So something like a third pot bet would be, I'm guessing, roughly where ace 8 wants to get to, and that's what D does. So he reevaluates kind of correctly and then navigates there immediately. And now facing this third pot bet, Juan Dominguez, his jack is, again, it's no longer good. So just like queen high was not too happy facing the raise, a jack is not too happy facing this bet. Sure, you have a gut shot, but there's a flush there and there's a pair on the board. So pot's ballooned out of his comfort zone. And once that happens, you have the option of turning your hand into a bluff, generally speaking, right? We don't want to turn ace deuce into a bluff here because it's a bit too strong. But queen jack is weak enough where it's a reasonable thing to do. And boom, he turns his hand into a bluff. And here, again, there are so many elements to this hand because what sizing do you go with? What value range are you representing? What bluffing range would you have? All of these are kind of things that both of these guys should be thinking about at the same time, and that's what makes this hand so unique. And you might say, well, Juan should bluff holding a heart, maybe Queen of Hearts Jack or 10 of Hearts Jack. But yeah, this hand is fair play as well. As long as the pot size is too big and you have some connectivity with the board, etc., it's fine. And now D is the one who now has to reevaluate, because he was making this bet, probably hoping to check back the river, and now, boom, pot balloon's out of control. And he has to, his ace-8, which was raising for value on the flop, betting for value on the turn, now, boom, pot's too big. So what do you do with ace-8? And similar to queen-jack on the flop, this is a boat draw. So you can't really do anything other than call on the turn. You just have too many outs to improve on an ace, king, jack, or 8. Your opponent's presumably repping a flush more than anything else. So he calls, and we get to the river, and maybe on a brick river, Juan is planning to shove as a bluff. But we have yet another haymaker on the river here with a 10 of spades, and suddenly Juan has a straight. And it's a really iffy spot with a straight, because, your value range that you were repping when you raised the turn is a flush. And you turned your jack into a bluff, and now you have a straight. So if you bet your straight, is it even a value bet at that point? Like, we can see what's the next best hand to a straight, something like an ace-8. How big can you actually bet with a straight? Can you check with a straight? Like, it's a weird spot to play. And in these weird spots when you're out of position, again, ask yourself, well, straight, how big a pot does a straight want? And the answer is, it's roughly what's in the middle. Maybe a tiny bit more, but this is roughly good enough. Like, you're not reasonably getting called by worse with any sized bet. So Juan now has to reevaluate. He's thinking what to do. D, of course, has just a bluff catcher, so he only beats bluffs. And remove some of the bluffs. If you're paying attention, you're thinking, well, what bet calls flop and bluffs turn? You might say, well, queen jack and jack 10 might do that, but look, queen jack is now a straight. And Juan is telling him, I now have a straight. That's the main hand that makes sense to bet the size as a straight. Or maybe a very low flush. And yeah, he decides to go for this. And I think it's very easy to understand why. And now D's in this situation where, he had his trips, he had his boat draw. Came the worst run out you could imagine for his hand. And now he's facing a 10% pot bet where, like, how do you fold trips to a 10% pot bet? So a lot of people here would just kind of click call, get shown the bad news, and move on. But he's looking at his ace-8 and he's thinking, there's always 3 options in poker, and we're seeing that over and over again in this hand. There's always 3 options in poker. The pot's too big for my hand, so yes, I can call. I'm not supposed to fold very often in theory, although it's very hard for my opponent to come up with bluffs. But I can also shove, because he's saying he has something like a straight or a weak flush. I could easily have better, so why not turn my ace-8 into a bluff? So this hand, which was raising flop for value, betting turn for value, calling turn as a draw, decides to turn itself into a bluff. And this is like haymaker after haymaker. And now Juan Dominguez has to look at his queen jack and be like, okay, this is too big for my hand. Now my hand's a bluff catcher again. And now he has to think, well, what would my opponent go with for value? And he has to remember it's an MTT. His opponent would probably not go very thin because he doesn't want to risk busting. So what would he go with for value? Well, boats, but most of the hands that make boats would have 3-bet, 3-flop, and then flushes. So high flushes, medium flushes, those are the hands he's worried about. And he has to think, are those hands going for it? Would they be too scared? Which bluffs are there? Which bluffs are there is crucial. And here you have to go through the process of hand reading and be like, well, do you raise the flop? That's, some flush draws. Would he raise flush draws? Maybe not that often. So yeah, some flush draws, some ace-X. And then he's like, which ace-X? Maybe ace-8, ace-9, ace-7, right? All of those hands would have bet the turn. All of those hands would call the raise. And those are going to be his potential bluffing combos on the river versus his potential value hands, which, like we said, are mostly going to be the flushes and how many of those played this way. And then you have to do this combinatoric stance in your head and try to get into your opponent's head. Are there any clues? Because, like we said, the way D played makes a lot of sense for ace-8, ace-7, ace-9. Would he turn those into a bluff? And this is a spot where a theoretical machine would give you a perfect answer, and then it wouldn't matter what you do. But humans constantly mess these spots up. And you guys see Juan Dominguez make the call, and this is not him randomizing. This is him trying to figure out and deciding, oh, I think my opponent is going to show up with ace-8. He's not clueless about what's going on. So this is beautiful hand, beautiful call, amazing to see. I think in a way, both players played it amazingly well. Even D, who lost, played it amazingly well. And kind of, like we said, haymaker after haymaker, the hand value changes, the line changes, the context, and you have to get to the river and keep track of everything. And yeah, really just an elite level hand. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you want to check out my new course, The Poker Blueprint, you can sign up to get notified in the description below. Launches September 30th, and if you purchase it during launch week, you'll also get a bonus course, the Tournament Blueprint, for free. So be sure to get it while you can. After that, the Tournament Blueprint is going to be $299. See you guys next week.